Thank you to Conflict of Nations for sponsoring today's video. Let's take a look at the Navy right now, just on a grand scale. We have the USS Gerald R. Ford. It was just announced today that they got extended again. This is their second extension that I'm aware of, but it puts their at-sea time up over 200 days now. And the thing we have to worry about here is fatigue and attrition. So obviously the sailors are going to get exhausted, and even though they have a good rotation, they get good meals, they get good rest in most cases, but not always, they can regenerate themselves. What doesn't get rested is the equipment. So we need to think about how long can these ships stay at sea and still maintain their functionality. Apparently they're doing very well so far, but that's not going to continue forever without some port time for maintenance. But if you like strategic thinking like this, military thinking, take a look at Conflict of Nations. Conflict of Nations is a free online PvP strategy game. Choose a real country to lead in modern global warfare. Fight up to 128 other players in real time in games that can take weeks to complete. Use many different units to build your army, tanks, jets, nuclear submarines, declare war on your neighbors, or forge alliances with other players. Choose your own strategy, engage in epic battles that take over the world. You can play with the same account on both PC and mobile, and you get an exclusive gift. Click the link in the description to get 13,000 gold, 1 month of premium subscription for free, offer only available for 30 days, so don't lose time. And I love the long-term strategy aspect of this game. So click the link in the description now and take advantage of my offer. All right, let's head over to Japan's economic exclusion zone, where we have some drama going down over here. Here we have an Australian warship, the HMAS Toowoomba, is operating in international waters in Japan's economic exclusion zone when, would you know it, big ocean theory aside, they run into a drift fishing net, a net that's been cut from a fishing trawler somewhere at some point in the past, out there drifting around the Pacific for God knows how long. Sure enough, gets run over by this ship. And what does it do when you run over a net? Well, it tangles the shaft and propellers, and you have to send divers into the water to go down there and cut the net off. And that's what this Australian warship is doing when this happens. The PLAN ship type 956EM Ningbo DDG 139 comes alongside as if to render assistance. This is a picture of the Ningbo here. This is a Chinese ship. This is a Sovereignty class that they bought from the Soviet Union back when there was a Soviet Union. They've since modernized it with Chinese equipment, but the ship itself still looks like a Sovereignty if it looks familiar to you. So what does the Australian captain do? He gets on the radio and they raise the diver flags. All the international symbols and flags are raised on the mast. Divers in the water, men working over the side. Do not transmit any active emissions, sonar or otherwise. Fathometer, nothing like that. And they also get on the radio, voice to voice, bridge to bridge, and say, hey, we have divers in the water. And the Chinese do acknowledge that. They reply on the radio as they're coming alongside the Australian warship. What happens next? What do you think happens next, folks? What would a ship pulling up alongside another ship do when one ship has a fouled screw, is dead in the water, and is trying to cut the net off the screw so it can continue underway? Well, most ships would render assistance. Do you need help? We have cutting gear, we have welding gear, we have our own divers. We can help you out. This was an opportunity to do something wonderful to improve relations. A PLAN ship helping out an Australian warship that has been stricken by a fishing net. But that's not what happened. What happened is the Russian ship, when it got close enough, began transmitting active sonar. That's in excess of 140 decibels. That type of sonar can cause severe physical pain and injury to the whole human body if you're submerged in a fluid when it happens, like the Pacific Ocean. And that is exactly what happened to these divers. All the divers that were in the water were immediately injured. These Aussie sailors trying to detangle the net from the screw and were brought aboard. They were all injured, and the Chinese continued their active transmission even after the captain told them that they were injuring their sailors. Eventually, the Chinese ship stopped, went away, but it's very clear that this was a deliberate, malicious action with intent to harm. And they followed through with it, harming Australian sailors that were working in the water. So what I want to ask of you is, what is the proper response to an action like this? I'll tell you how they responded. Australia responded by releasing these facts and evidence on local news media. This is how I found out about it. But we have discovered recently that even with video evidence of the PLAN ships trying to capsize Philippine supply vessels to their Marines on Second Thomas Shoal, and events like this where they intentionally get close enough to harm swimmers in the water with active sonar and then actually doing it, that reporting on this and pointing the finger at China and saying China bad again is not resolving. It is not changing their behavior. So what is the next step in deterrence? Because this is just another escalation in Chinese aggressive behavior. Eventually, if it's not curtailed, it inevitably will end in someone being killed. Someone's going to die to actions like this if we don't find a way to change it, to let China know that this behavior is unacceptable. And they really missed an opportunity to look good by providing assistance. They just, instead of harming the divers underway. I am beside myself about this story. How dare they?
How dare you?
This. Sound like Greta for a minute there. So, but what I want you to do is give us some ideas. Put it in the comment section. You know, I'll read all of them. What do you think is the proper action here? How do we stop China from behaving like this to the point of injuring and eventually killing somebody? You know, what's the answer? I don't know. Let's head down to Australia because we do have an AUKUS deal with them, and we're on Pillar 2 now. Pillar 1, if you remember, was the submarine deal, which was very good. Training, building submarines, selling them 3 submarines. That's all Pillar 1. There's multiple pillars to this agreement. Pillar 2 focuses on technology. It's on cyber capability, artificial intelligence, quantum technologies, and how that applies to undersea capabilities. It's really getting a technical advantage and maintaining that technical advantage between the 3 countries. The idea is, if we're ever in conflict with another nation, we're going to be 1 or more technical generations ahead of them. So whatever systems they're using to employ on board their ships and unmanned vessels, we have the next generation of that. We have what they wish they had. Okay? So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to share a common control system for unmanned vehicles, both air, surface, and submerged, all going to have the same hardware requirements, software interface. So you can take a Royal Navy sailor, put them on a Australian ship that's controlling an American unmanned vehicle, and it's all interchangeable. That's the goal here. And I think it's a really good idea. One of the examples of this that's happening right now in the Pacific is the American Ghost Fleet has been exercising its ability and demonstrating really its ability quite successfully with an LCS that is remotely controlling multiple vehicles like the Ranger here, and Ranger is one of the vehicles in this test. And these unmanned vehicles, like you see here, are very inexpensive to build when compared to a warship. We can pump these out really quick here in the United States. There's already a request for a design document to mass produce these in our shipyards. That's happening this year, folks. Well, 2024, right? And so also, Australia's buying or testing, they're probably going to buy our new airborne low frequency sonar system, which word on the street is it's really good. And that is a low frequency sonar that's carried by the Seahawk helicopter that the Australians are already using. And it's very good at burning through those sonic layers and finding those submarines. And while I should be opposed to that because it's our team, you know, we're finding that maybe the Chinese or the Korean submarines, I'm okay with it. So they're going to be buying our airborne, probably buying our airborne low frequency sonar systems for their helicopters. And we're going to have a shared control interface for controlling our unmanned vehicles in all domains, whether it's air, surface, or subsurface domain. That's coming up. All right, let's head over to Germany, talking about naval aviation and remote control. Germany is going to buy 8 of the P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft and replace all of their P-3Cs. Now, they've already begun replacing their old maritime patrol aircraft with 3 of the new airborne ones, of the new P-8s rather, and they're going to complete that wing of planes, end up with a total of 8. These are good for maritime surveillance, not just submarine hunting. If you just want to keep an eye on things, this is a great platform for it, and that's what they're probably going to use it for in peacetime, while keeping a good ASW capability along with it. Now, I do want to talk about how this affects Russia. We're going to open up, broaden our view a little bit here and take a look at the 4 main Russian fleets here. So right above me here, this is the Black Sea Fleet. I have it circled in red because they're bottled in. They can't move in and out of the Black Sea because there's a war going on in that area. And part of the rules of that war is if you're in the Black Sea, you got to stay and you can't come out of the Black Sea. And even people that aren't involved in the war can't go through it either. So they're kind of bottled up right here, and they're not performing that well. That's another thing that we're going to talk about is the surface fleet. The Russian surface fleet is losing to a nation without a navy, and that's really embarrassing. And that really shows the power of shore-based anti-ship weapons and even airborne anti-ship weapons and the new unmanned surface vessels that are going into other harbors and destroying or damaging rather all these warships, whether they're in port or at sea. There's no safe place in the Black Sea, it seems, for them anywhere west of the Crimean Peninsula or the Crimean Peninsula itself there. And so they're kind of bottled up there. So we're not going to talk about any more about them. But look at the Baltic Sea up there. St. Petersburg has a small fleet as well, and a lot of really good shipbuilding capability is up in St. Petersburg, but with the expansion of NATO to now include Finland, which is really key here, also Sweden, we've turned the Baltic Sea into essentially a NATO lake, much like the Mediterranean and the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean is, to be fair. But there's no one getting in or out of St. Petersburg without being observed by as many as 7 NATO nations, all with their own maritime aviation and navies. And so if Russia wants to do anything clandestine, like, I don't know, blow up a pipeline, there's no way they're going to get away with it and not have countries like Sweden know about it. Those days are over. So they're all locked up. Now, they can operate in and out of the St. Petersburg harbor, but they can't do it without being observed. That's why they're in red there. But the 2 navies over here, the Northern Fleet, which is the white circle above me, and the Pacific Fleet, they can operate with clandestinely and with impunity, essentially going to sea anyway, with impunity. So we are going to talk about them. Let's take a look at the Pacific Fleet just from a numbers point of view. They have 1 cruiser, they have 5 destroyers. One of those destroyers is an old Sovereignty class, which somehow is still commissioned. And one thing I will say about the Russian Navy is they have a tendency to never formally decommission anything, it seems. If it doesn't work anymore, they'll just tie it to a pier until it sinks. And then as long as there's a flagpole, they'll still put the flag on it and keep it commissioned. But with their submarines, that's a totally different story. And that's really the point that I'm going to get to here today. Let's take a look at the submarines that operate out of the Pacific Fleet. We have 5 ballistic missile submarines that are very good and 22 attack submarines, varying from nuclear fast attack submarines to conventional Kilo class, and some SSGNs are in that number of 22 as well. So they have a very large, by comparison to their surface fleet numbers, they have a very large submarine fleet that's very capable. They get the funding that they need. The maintenance and training that we are not seeing performed in the surface fleet is happening in the submarine fleet. Russia's always operated that way. I should also mention that there are dozens of smaller missile boats in the Pacific Fleet that are not being accounted for here. I'm talking about large ships here. So the Russian Pacific Fleet is still very capable, but it's almost exclusively because of its submarine arm. The same can be said with the Northern Fleet. Relatively low number of surface ships. They have 3 large cruiser-sized ships and 8 destroyers and frigates, with a large number of small missile boats that I'm not even counting because they're pretty ridiculous. Coastal defense is what we used to call those boats. But look at their submarines. 7 ballistic missile submarines operating out of the Kola Peninsula and the White Sea there. And then 20 attack boats. And those are, again, the very capable Yasin class, and then the Kilo class, which is very quiet, and then the SSGNs, the old Oscar IIs, are still operating out of that. They have a large number of submarines that are very well funded. The crews are trained. They're pretty quiet because I've tracked them myself. I can tell you that they do work. Like, especially the ballistic missile submarines, whenever they do their ballistic missile test, it's rare that they don't complete the test. At least get the missile out of the submarine part. If the missile fails in flight, I can't do anything about that. But as far as the performance of the crew and the equipment on board the submarines, that works. And so that's really the strength of the Russian Navy. And one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up, besides to just talk about the Russian Navy and its capability or lack thereof in certain fleets, is a channel on YouTube that I subscribe to, I admire and respect. And the man's name is Peter Zeihan. He gets a lot of things right. But recently, he got two things very wrong, and this is what we're going to talk about. One of his videos, going back about 2 weeks now, maybe 3 by the time you see this, he said that the Russian Navy is collapsing, which is a very clever title for a YouTube video. It's got lots of clicks, I'm sure, because of that title, but he's simply incorrect. While he makes the point that the Russian Navy is bottled up into these 4 fleets, they can't combine forces, which he's right about. He's absolutely right. The strength of the Russian Navy has nothing to do with their surface ships. Their surface ships individually can be very strong when compared to individual American ships. I'm thinking of the LCS, but the real power projection is from their submarine fleet. That is very capable. It's very large, well-trained and well-funded. And I can tell you folks, it works. So the Russian Navy is not collapsing. They've been embarrassed in the Black Sea. NATO has expanded and bottled up St. Petersburg like a champagne cork. Kaliningrad should be returned to Poland or Germany. We'll see if that actually happens with the peace deal in Ukraine. I don't expect that to happen, but it might. And the last thing, the most recent thing that Peter said in a different video now was that lithium isn't as good as you think. And I recommend you guys go watch his videos because he gets a lot of things right. But 2 things he said about lithium that don't make any sense to me is that lithium is not a dense power source, battery source. It's one of the densest we have. So he's simply not correct about that. It's the densest we can make at scale anyway and put in, fleets, especially submarines. We use lithium ion batteries in submarines because they are a dense, compact, high energy source of power. The next thing he said in that same video, talking about lithium batteries, is that they don't discharge quickly. Well, I don't know what measuring stick he's using for the term quickly, but the lithium ion batteries can discharge quickly enough to get a conventionally powered submarine out of the way of a torpedo and maintain that high speed for long enough to evade that weapon. So it is certainly able to discharge enough energy for a long enough time to be effective as a military source of power for our submarines and Russian submarines. Japan uses it. Taiwan's using it now. China's been using it for a little while. So lithium ion batteries are still very important, not for electric cars. Screw those things. For our submarines, it's vital for them, and it's being used around the world. So lithium is better than you think, is what I would say. So anyway, I don't want anyone going over to his channel. Don't put up any nasty comments. Hell, if anything, say something nice to him because he's very smart and he gets a lot of things right. But I did disagree with these 2 things that he had mentioned. So I wanted to set the record straight because there's a lot of crossover between our audience and his. All right. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. And thanks again to Conflict of Nations for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description and take advantage of my offer.